Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Esoteric Moon Gathering. Thanks for joining us again. I'm Dottie Lamoureux, the host of your summit. My intention with this summit is that you are able to walk away with practical tools and knowledge, wisdom to support your inner knowing and trust as we walk through this very new world. So I'm very excited today to have with me Bevin Niemann. And her talk is entitled Coincidence or Synchronicity, Listening to the Intuitive Signs and Messages Meant Specifically for You. Bevin is a life purpose coach for intuitive empaths, light workers, and mystics. If you've been asking, why am I here and how am I meant to serve, you're on the right track. It's time to discover your purpose, master your gifts, and create a life that lights you up. Bevin specializes in business and career development for spiritual, holistic, creative, and wellness practitioners. She is the two-time host of the Shift Network's Evolved Empath Summit, which reached over 60,000 sensitive souls in 100 countries. Her writing has been featured on Conscious Reminder, Mind, Body, Spirit Network, and Spiritual Biz Magazine. Bevin is the co-founder of 1 Million Empaths, a high vibe community bringing together the planetary grid of light workers to meet their tribe, master their gifts, and make a difference. It's truly fabulous, Bevin. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited for this.
Thank you so much, Dottie. I'm so pleased to be here. And, ultimately, I'm just a learner. We have these bios and all of these titles and accomplishments, and those are important to honor ourselves. But mostly, I'm just so pleased to continue to learn and to connect with people like yourself, and so grateful to be here to talk about synchronicity and coincidence and trusting your intuitive knowing.
Yay. Yay, yay. Well, I honor your humble approach as being a learner. I appreciate that very much. It's refreshing. So thank you for that. Can you tell us a little bit more about a concept you often teach about, which is becoming fluent in the language of energy?
I love it. It's one of my favorite topics. And, as we've discovered, and we've known for a long time in human terms, but we've recently started to talk about how everything is energetic, right? So our thoughts are creating energetic ripples out into the consciousness, the collective consciousness. Our emotions are literally energy in motion. Our physical vessels are small vibrating packets all coming together to create a form. Everything, the sounds that we take into our ears, all energy, right? All energy. And in particular, a lot of the people I work with, and probably those who are attracted to this type of event, would probably see themselves as being more sensitive to all of that energy. That's the way I actually define being an empath, is those who can sense those subtle and sometimes not so subtle shifts in energetic changes that are going on in our world. And so if we are energetic beings and we're living in an energetic dimension and we're connected with other energetic dimensions, we can actually practice becoming fluent in that language in the same way that we practice becoming fluent in our language of origin, in written language and body language. When we can read other people, we can become fluent in the language of energy. It takes practice and focus, and I think this is what we're going to really dive into today. So I'm so excited.
Excellent. When did you start to read energy or notice that that was something that you could do?
Yeah, so I really feel that as I look back, I've been really tuned in to energy since I was a child, and could connect very deeply with the cycles of nature, could connect with animal spirits, could connect with those who had passed on, could be in a room and just sense all of this adult stuff that was going on underneath. And I really couldn't articulate it as a young child, but I knew that all of that was going on. And then as I went off to college, you know, I sort of started to shut that part of myself down. I thought I could shut it off, right? I was like, you know, that's overwhelming. And it wasn't really a very nurturing and supportive environment for that. And so for many years, I was sort of a skeptic and even an atheist. You know, I was like, if I can't see it, you can't prove it to me. And I say that these cycles we go through, they're beneficial regardless, you know, so there was some benefit to me exploring what is the very human, visceral, sensory side of life. And that sort of brought me back to appreciate this intuitive quality that I have about myself. And then about 7 years ago, I had a reawakening and really felt this deep void, like I had just left a part of myself behind, and went off on this exploration through many teachings and meditation and healing work. And in this process discovered that this is the space in which I am supposed to shine my light and which I'm supposed to give. And so, and I mean, I choose to as well. I don't just mean supposed to, because I'm a strong believer in free will. But becoming fluent in the language of energy is a daily practice for me, just sensing into what's coming up in the collective, what's coming up inside of me, what messages are arriving, and how am I interpreting those and applying those practically to my life. So yeah, this has been my journey, and I continue to travel this path.
Mm-hmm. What practices do you use to become fluent and to sense into the universal energy and other people's energies? Do you have specific tools that you use?
Yeah, I thought it'd be fun to share, since a lot of what your summit is focused on is, you know, rituals and ceremonies and practices. So this was one I did recently. I happen to live by a nature preserve, and so I go out into the forest and I just pick a particular path because it feels good to me, and I start down the path. And I know, like all paths in the forest and in life, you're going to come to a fork in the road, right? When you have to make a decision. And many times we can get into this place where we're just like over analyzing, right? It's like, well, you know, I could go here and this looks more safe. And, you know, we go into that place. And what I do is when I go into the forest, I set an intention just to let go. And when I get to the fork, I say left or right in my mind, or even out loud if I'm by myself. And I basically just whatever comes is where I go. And so recently I did this, and I was going this direction. I came to the next fork and I was like, okay, cross the water, up the hill. And I crossed the water and I went down into this ravine that was underneath a bridge, and across underneath the bridge, I could see all this, like this dark spot. It was really interesting. And as I got closer and closer to it, I realized it was an entire colony of upside down hanging daddy long leg spiders, right? There were thousands of them just right on top of each other. And it was amazing. I'd never seen anything like that. Of course, you know, the spider energy has some really amazing symbolism as far as weaving and storytelling. And there's a lot of, different archetypes that the spider relates to. But then I turned just briefly and I looked under the bridge, and there was this piece of graffiti which says, love yourself. And I thought, well, this is where my intuitive knowing wanted to go today. You know, I got to see all of this and I just followed. And so you can use everyday circumstances, whether you're in the grocery store and you're like, okay, so do I go down aisle 11 or aisle 15, like which feels good? And then you go, okay, so what type of food is my body wanting? And you kind of go to that space, right? And you see, you know, what's there for you. And you can do this as a practice to like help build your trust and your confidence in your own gifts. And it's great to do this on like a daily basis. I have all of these different teas next to my teapot, and every morning I get up and I start the teapot going, and I say, okay, which tea should I use? And I pull that tea, and they all have a little tag on them with a message. And then I read the message, sort of like a fortune cookie for the day, if you will. And it gives me a certain energy. And then I watch and I see how the day unfolds and where that particular message showed up for me. And it starts to help me build this skill set in becoming fluid in this language of energy. It's like all of these messages come from all different places, and they have something really important to tell us.
I really like that. What would you say to somebody that is doubting their intuition a lot, that thinks maybe I didn't hear what I thought I heard? Am I just telling myself what I want to hear? That kind of
Mhm.
thing.
Yeah, I think that's really common. And there were many, many times in my past history where I did not listen to my knowing. And, sometimes that sort of worked out, and sometimes it didn't come with very good consequences, especially the bigger decisions in life. And yet, what I started to realize, at least my own belief, is that there is no wrong choice, right? There's no wrong choice. Um, it may not feel very good, to do the thing that we thought we wanted to do and then it doesn't work out. But we always have an immense amount of learning and growth from those experiences, whether it's a relationship or we took the wrong job or this, what if there is no wrong decision? So when you start to release, like, you have to do this perfectly, you have to know. And this is the difference between accessing our intuitive side and accessing our intellectual side. So we have these two parts of our mind, right? And we have lots of other intelligences as well. But the intellectual mind wants to know, right? It likes to work things out. It likes to have a plan. It likes to have certainty. It's a part of helping us feel safe, and that's important. And the intuitive is really the mystery, right? The unknown, the smoky mirror. I have a favorite card in one of my decks, and it's the smoky mirror. It's like, yeah, when it comes up, I'm like, okay. And eventually we can kind of take our hand and like go like this, and we'll see, like, oh, it's starting to come into focus. So the intuitive mind is like a puzzle, a mystery that's unfolding. And there's something really exciting about that. And if we can allow ourselves to relax into that and know that we don't have to have all the answers, and yet, ironically, all the answers are there, and the whole thing is unfolding, and it will unfold naturally. And it's a process of developing trust, right? So we might have that voice inside of ourselves that if we did deny our intuition at some point, and then we had some negative consequences, we might say, well, I'm not really good at making those decisions. Or like you said, maybe I didn't really hear that little inner voice, or maybe that was just coincidence. And then we start to doubt. But as we gather ways to allow the intellectual mind to gain proof of that, right? So I went into the forest and I chose these different paths, and I had no idea why I was doing it. And at the end, it all revealed itself. And my intellectual mind went, oh, okay, this is a good message today for me to pay attention to. So, and the same thing, with the little tags on my tea. It's like, I don't quite know how that's going to show up today, but almost always I work with a client or a friend or something, and they say those words, or they ask me a question about something, and that is exactly the thing that I get to impart. So as you start to look for the ways that these different synchronicities and these intuitive messages show up for you, and you start to see that it's coming up more than once, here it comes again, here it comes again, you realize, oh, this is a real thing. It's not just coincidence.
What is the difference between synchronicity and coincidence?
Yeah, so I think it's really like looking at it from the after effect, right? And so coincidence, afterwards, it's like, well, I'm just going to dismiss that. It just sort of happened randomly. Do I believe that things can happen randomly? What I believe is that everyone is manifesting, and we're powerful creators of our own reality, whether we're doing it consciously or doing it unconsciously. And there's no judgment there, because I did it very unconsciously for a long period of my life, and some things I'm still doing unconsciously. So, but we realize, everyone's manifesting, and sometimes I am directly manifesting something consciously or unconsciously, and then it happens. And sometimes I'm there in the space and someone else's manifestation shows up, and then I'm kind of a part of it, whether I wanted to or not. So that is kind of my viewpoint on whether things are random or things are meant to be. I don't think that everything is like destiny or fate necessarily, but I do believe that there are specific people or situations that perhaps on some level we want to intersect with, because that's really a part of our soul's evolution and growth and development. So coincidence is like sort of dismissive. It's just saying, well, it's just random. The universe is random. Life is random. Synchronicity is there are things that are resonating and vibrating at a similar frequency. And when they come close to each other, it's like an attraction, right? And they start vibrating and resonating together. And if we're looking, we'll find even more things that are vibrating and resonating at that same frequency or a similar frequency. And so for me, that's what synchronicity is. And, you know, Carl Jung was one of the first people who brought this concept forth. And then obviously it's come really into popular culture. Like it's a really, a lot of people are very interested in this. Like, oh, you know, if it happens two or three times, it just isn't random anymore. And for me, I've started to realize that some of the intuitive messages only come once, and it's not random either.
Mm. Yeah. Thank you. That's a really clear description. I appreciate that. So why and how do intuitive signs and messages appear?
Yeah. So usually, like for me, messages begin to appear when I'm at some level asking a question about my life, asking for more clarity, asking for a particular situation to show up. When I'm working on manifestation, it's like, it's these things will come, you know, as I'm asking. And when I'm really not asking, it doesn't seem to happen as often. So you can be in as deep of a state of asking for this and connecting with it as you desire to. For me, I've decided to take a really deep dive, and I saw this beautiful short film by Jim Carrey, the actor, who has since become a painter, and it's called I Need Color, which is a beautiful metaphor for life, right? We need to have color and vitality and vibrancy. And in this, there was a message for me, and he said, well, everything changed for me when I realized that all of life is talking to me. And at that, you know, that how you've been in something, you've like heard somebody say something, or you've watched a movie and you're like, oh, that's the thing right there. That was how that moment for me. And I went, well, what would happen if I looked around and I began engaging with life like it's all talking to me? That every conversation is important, that every person I connect with has something to tell me. Every book I decide to pick up and I open it to this particular page, there's something there that I can learn from, you know, and life really changed for me then, Dottie, after I decided to take that viewpoint. It really brought back some of the magic that I had accessed when I was a child, an intuitive, empathic child, that I really had lost for a good portion of my adult life. And now I want to be in that place again. I want to be in that place where life is wondrous and incredible and magical and funny and quirky. You know, that's where I'm choosing to walk at this point.
Excellent. I love it. Circling back to synchronicities, can you share one of your, like, an experience from your life that you really valued, a synchronicity that's made a lot of sense for you?
Yeah. So several times in my life, I have gotten this knowing ahead of time, and many people will sense energy in advance. And we don't really know necessarily what the timeline looks like. So there's sort of like energy doesn't really have a timeline. It doesn't really conform to human linear passages. It just is, right? It shows up. And then I'm like, okay, is this today or 2 years from now? Like, I don't really know. But I've received several messages in my life, like, it's time to not live in this place again. It's time to move somewhere else. And it'll just come. And it's like, when it shows up, it's like, okay, well, where next? You know, that's the question I always ask myself. And one time I got that message, and it told, you know, basically all of the signs kept pointing towards moving here to Texas, in the United States. And it wasn't a place that I ever thought I would live. It wasn't even a place that was on my radar. I didn't have any family here. I didn't know a soul. I was actually in the process of moving into a new career field at that point. And yet some part of me, and this is even before I had my awakening, decided to fix up my house, put it on the market, and pack up a truck and come, and I just did. I hadn't even met my boss, who I was going to work for. I just met the regional manager. And so I did that, and I came here, and I had no idea why. And I think it took me about 3 months of being here before I looked around one day and I was like, oh, I live in a different state. Now I live in a different place. You get so caught up in the unpacking and the settling in. And then it just struck me. I was like, oh, okay, that happened. It's I almost, went through a time shift. But what happened here is that there was a deep undercurrent of spiritual community that was moving into this area. And I ended up several years later having a really profound spiritual awakening. And I realized the relationship that I was in was not the right one for me. And I realized the career I was in was eventually not the right one for me. And I realized that I really wanted to connect back into my divinity and my connection with the higher self. And I went on this path, and I was like, well, I want to try meditation. And so I get on Meetup and I look up meditation, and there was a person who was 5 minutes from the house I lived in. So I go to her house, and she's talking about auras and meditating with divine light. And I'm like, I have no idea what she's talking about, but I'm coming back. And I did. And I ended up studying with the metaphysical mystery school that she was a part of for 3 years. And then sitting in one of those meditation classes, someone said, well, we're talking about spiritual gifts. And she said, well, some people are empaths. And I was like, empath? And then I went and looked it up, and I was like, oh, that's me. And then it just kept rolling forward. So sometimes we get this knowing, and that is obviously a very, that's a big life-changing knowing, right? So we started off by talking about, do I go right or left in the forest? And then we ended up okay, do I change my entire life? And the answer I gave was yes. It happened over a period of years. So intuitive knowings can come up a lot of different ways. And then this particular one, sometimes when we get something that's really profound like that, I need to be in a different career, or I'm supposed to be in a different relationship, or not in a relationship at all, or whatever those things are that are really going to be very, very profound, or something about our health, perhaps. It might bring up some fear or trepidation, because it's the unknown, as we talked about. It's the mystery, and we don't know quite where we're going with that, but we just have a knowing, we just feel like we're pulled in that direction. And so that would be a series of synchronicities that I've had, and I could go on and on. I could weave that story out many, many more times, but that would be a big one for me.
Awesome. I like the practical, real life, because some people are like, was that a synchronicity? I don't really know. I'm not sure. Did I do the right thing by following, so I like to hear people's experiences, and that's really awesome. That's really a great intuitive following that brought you such a great gift. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, how can you tell the difference between the emotion of fear and an intuitive knowing or message?
Yeah. So what I say is it's are you being pulled towards, or do you feel like you're contracting away from something? Mm-hmm. So when I had those large intuitive knowings, part of me was a little bit nervous and a little bit apprehensive about it, because it was just the unknown, and I didn't know what was going to, be expected of me, or how I would do all of this. The logical mind was like, well, what do we do, and how do we live, and where do we go, and how do we, make a living, and all these things. And that's normal, it's normal, especially if our intuition is speaking about something that is pretty significant, a big significant part of our life. But the difference is that fear makes us contract back. Fear has us saying, this is dangerous. This isn't for me, right? This is, and the knowingness that you're on the right path, has you saying, this is for you. Come on, this is for you. And you might resist, you might resist. you might say, oh, I'm not ready yet, or those are normal things, but you have a knowing underneath somewhere that this is for you. As a matter of fact, I pulled this card this morning. I'll share it with you if you like. But this is a beautiful card, and it says she feels, she knows, right? And when we say it's really just the feminine nature inside of ourselves, that very deeply intuitive, tuned in part of ourselves. And so she's looking and she's like, okay, I don't know what this is going to lead to, but I know it's going to be beautiful because she's got the big feather up here, right? And so it's like, yeah, she knows. And this is really the difference. Fear would be contracting back. Fear would be like, oh, I don't want any part of that. Fear comes up when our ego is feeling like it can't protect us. It doesn't, it doesn't want to go there. And so there's a difference between those two things. And sometimes following our intuitive knowing does take courage. It does take us to feel a little bit of fear and then move past it and move through it in order to get to what is next and what is better. As a matter of fact, actually a couple of days ago, that knowing came up for me again. The time here in Texas is almost finished, and now it's time to explore what's next. And I went, okay, I've been here before. I've been around the bend this one once or twice. So I'm like, okay, we'll just let it unfold, and then you can start to talk to that part of yourself that feels nervous, that feels afraid, that doesn't want to believe. And maybe that is your own voice, and maybe that's a voice of someone in your family that's still speaking. Maybe that's a voice of, your boss or your partner or anyone who doesn't experience the world quite the way you do. So one of the things I say about people who are highly intuitive and people who are not as intuitive, everyone has intuition. Some people access it more deeply. Is that, they literally don't experience the world the same way you do. They can't sense that energy yet. And so trying to explain what that's like, it doesn't make that other person wrong. It doesn't make them insensitive to your gifts. It just means that that they're not able to get there yet. And so what you can do with that is sort of wait until you have some more concrete information. So you might have the knowing, and maybe you'll tell people and maybe you won't right at the beginning. But then as more things start to unfold, you watch the synchronicities, you're like, okay, now I know that this showed up and this showed up and this person called me, or I got this job offer. And now you have something that you can actually tell most people without seeming like, okay, she's crazy, and there's probably a lot of this going on right now because everyone during this particular time in our world is really going within and reflecting, like, what's happening in my life? Is this how I want my life to be? There's many, many people that are awakening to that. And it can be a confusing time until we start to build this trust. So start with the little things. I don't recommend starting with moving across the country or to another place, just off the cuff, unless that's what you're really into. But start with the small things first, and then look for the facts to back it up, to reinforce it.
Okay. And you mentioned maybe something that might hold us back could be somebody else's voice or our own inner voice. Do you have ways to tell the difference between our voice and maybe another conditioned patterned voice we might have?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, like for me, my own voice sounds like my voice even when it's inside my head. I have other voices. I call them the personas, right? Sort of like a committee of different people who developed at different times in our lives for different purposes. Some of those are a little more fearful, and some of those are a little more, assertive and go-getters, and some of those are more like, I'm just going to watch. We have all these different parts of ourselves. And for me, what it's really about is honoring all of those voices. So even if that voice somehow reminds you of your mother, or your grandmother, or your father, or whoever, honor that voice is there. Honor that perhaps it has some information to provide. I think when we disown any part of ourselves, then that's maybe where we get into the place where we don't trust anymore. And so it takes some time, perhaps, when that comes up, you receive a knowing, then you hear a couple of different voices who are telling you different things, and now you're confused. You're like, what do I do? Do I follow it? Do I not follow it? Okay, this one has a point, that one has a point. And this is probably where the most valuable thing you can do is just get quiet, right? So when we just sort of get the monkey mind going and it runs and it runs and gets on the hamster wheel, we're really not going to get there. We're really not going to find those answers, right? It tells us that it's time to just get quiet. Just invite all those voices. It's like, I'm listening to everybody and I'm going to take everything into account. And then you're sort of like affirming that I'm wise, I'm capable of making a good decision. But maybe we just need to be quiet. Maybe we just need to wait. A lot of times I'll receive something and then I'm like, it's just not time yet. Because I'm like, it didn't show up yet. What happened? How come it's not here? And I'm an Aries, so I'm a fire energy and I'm really impatient, and I'm learning in this lifetime how to be more patient. I'm learning how to work with the timing and the cycles of when things show up. And so I'm like, oh, it's not time yet. Okay, I'll just wait. I'll just wait. I've had things come in and then it didn't happen for 3 years. That's a really long time to kind of sense energy and wonder what's going to go on. And then I've had things like I've sensed something and it's happened immediately. And so, so being patient, watching things unfold. If I don't have an answer, if I don't have a clear direction, I wait. Or I ask, okay, I would like to have clarity about this. And I wait for something else to come in. And the way that some of these things come in are really fun. So sometimes I'll be thinking about something and a particular song will come on the radio and the lyrics will definitely have a direct message for me. I'm like, that's really funny. Or I just feel really called to email someone or reach out and like say, what's going on? How you doing? You wanna chat? And then when we do, there's like something there. Sometimes I'll feel like I want to get on, and like before we went into shelter in place, I was like, I want to get on and see, like, is there a place I'm supposed to go, and a new place, a new group of people I haven't met yet. And I'll just follow those things and follow those inclinations and then wait for it sort of to unfold and try my best to be in that curiosity place, that discovery place, that place of like, watch, look how it's unfolding, as opposed to like, why hasn't happened yet? Why don't I know? And then when I come to a place where something's sort of butting up against it and it just feels really hard, like you're pushing that rock up the hill, I think to myself, oh, maybe it's just not the right fit. Maybe it's just, it's not that life is supposed to be perfectly smooth and easy, but it is supposed to flow a little bit more, right? It's supposed to flow a little bit more. And this is a part of becoming fluent in the language of energy, of learning, like, when we're pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing against something and it's not happening, it's like, okay, let's just release back. And as soon as you release back and you surrender and you let go, something shows up almost always immediately. So it's testing it out. I say, like, my life is an intuitive laboratory. I'm using myself as the subject and there's a part of me that's participating in the whole thing and a part of me that's watching and going, that's really interesting, and look how this worked, and I could use that again next time to pay attention to that. So yeah, it's just it's a practice, and it's a lifelong practice.
What would you say to somebody that feels that might get stuck in that wanting to know and maybe that pushing or fear around not knowing?
Yeah. So this would be a time just to give yourself permission to rest. One of the cards that came up today was, restore and replenish. Just go into the rest cycle. When we get into that place, because we're just like trying so hard to get answers or to do, we just need to be in the being energy. We just need to be quiet. Give our body a break, give our mind a break. Sometimes when I lay in bed and I'm having trouble like going to sleep because I've got all of that going on, I'll just say, thank you, wise mind. You were amazing today. You worked out so many things. This is what you did well. I really appreciate it. And right now it's time for us to stop and unwind and get rested and let the body regenerate. I literally talk to it and I just, talk it down, and then I turn over and I go to sleep. Like, it happens. And it's really like setting, strong intentions. And those parts of ourselves, they just want to be acknowledged. They just want to be acknowledged. The mind will keep saying something until you go, oh, okay. And it sounds funny because it's not like it's a different part or multiple personalities or something, but it is, we are multidimensional beings. We are not just one thing. We are a human persona, and then we have lots of layers of that and all of our experiences, and then we're spiritual nature and we have layers of that. So it's just honoring all of those parts of ourselves. Just getting quiet, or doing something different. If you like to read, if you like to walk in nature, if you taking a hot bath, just let you get into that space where you can unwind. Each person, it'll be a little bit different, to let themselves kind of let go of needing to figure it all out.
Thank you. Very practical. I appreciate that. One last question. That deck, is that Sacred Rebels, Elena Fairchild?
It is Sacred Rebels. I love her work.
Anybody out there looking for a new deck, it's amazing. So beautiful.
Is.
And she gives little prayers and practices with each card. It's really lovely work. Do you have anything else that you'd like to share? Or do you want to talk about your free gift, which is amazing?
Sure, I would love to. Yes, so I recently developed a 3-part video series. It's like a little mini course on the path to your life purpose. And through my own experiences and then working with all of my clients, I've noticed about 8 different stages that we go to, and they're not always linear. Sometimes they come linear, and sometimes we go around in a cycle, and that's okay. But I just describe what each of these different stages are. And, it can be things like being exploratory, and you're just out there trying a lot of different things. You're thinking like, why am I here? And how am I, meant to contribute? And how can I make a difference in the world? And maybe you try a little bit of this and you try a little bit of that. And you're like, is it yoga? Is it this? Is it that? And you see what feels really good to you and what communities you really vibe with. And then you go someplace and you're like, no, that's really not it. And it's like, it's okay. It's just information. So that's one of the stages. And then you start to focus in. So this training, takes you over about a week. You'll get several videos in a row, and it helps you really get clear on which stage are you in, and knowing that it's okay that you've been through these different aspects, and that sometimes we go back through the stages again because we're reinventing ourselves and we're rediscovering at a deeper level, is there something different I'm meant to do in this next chapter of my life? So I'm so pleased to be able to offer that to the audience, and you can access that right on the homepage of my website, which is perceptivesouls.com.
And that'll be on the Summit website too, easy to access. Well, thank you so much. That is a beautiful offering, really, truly beautiful. And what a great opportunity for somebody to maybe look at things differently than they might otherwise. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
This has been so much fun. It went so fast.
It did. We probably could talk like this for hours, right?
Yeah. Yes. But other people might get bored. So, but thank you. I really am so grateful for your time and really appreciate your energy and your beautiful shining light in the world. Thank you, Bevin.
And thank you so much, Dottie, for bringing all of this together and creating a space. We need to tap back into that esoteric wisdom. And get into the flow of the cycles of the moon and the tides and the seasons of our life and all of those things. So I'm so glad that you're out there gathering us and bringing people together in community. It's a wonderful gift that you're providing as well.
Thank you. Thanks. And thank you to everybody that tuned in. I hope you learned and had as much fun as we did, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.